Hi, everybody. This is Brian Judd. I'm the Executive Director of the Association of Publishers for Special Sales, and also the founder and the board member of the Connecticut Authors and Publishers Association. These are our sponsors of tonight's webinar, The Anatomy of a Book Cover by Michelle DiFilippo. And I've seen this presentation, and you're in for a real treat tonight, and I think that you'll get a lot out of it. So just want to introduce myself. That I am the executive director of apps, as I mentioned, and I have a lot of experience in book marketing, but I don't know too much about cover design. That's why I lean on people like Michelle. She's designed a lot of covers and the layout, page layout for several of my clients, and I've always had good results from it. So that's why I asked her to be our presenter tonight on this topic. I'd just like to introduce Michelle. Michelle DiFilippo owns 1106 Design, a Phoenix company that offers top quality book cover and interior design, editing, author websites, and more, with hand-holding every step of the way. But creating a great book is only the first step. Indie publishers face a blizzard of choices. Michelle's coaching can help you analyze the options and choose the solutions that best advance your publishing goals. So I will turn this over to Michelle now and take it away.
Well, thank you, Brian.
Just hit the show my screen and you can, it's all yours.
Oh, okay. There we go. All right.
There you are. Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Brian, for that nice introduction, and thank all of you for listening today and giving me this opportunity to talk a little bit about one of my favorite subjects, and that is cover design. So I thought today I would start with 4 topics. First of all, what is a book cover? How should it look? What makes a book cover work? And then I'd offer a few tips on choosing a cover designer and working with a cover designer so that you have a pleasant and a successful experience. And as Brian said, we'll pause a couple of times along the way and take your questions, because I want you to get what you want out of this session, not just what I think you want. So gather up those questions and feel free to ask away. So what is a book cover? It sounds like a very simple question, doesn't it? And you can find a lot of people out there who think that a book cover is just a very simple task. Pick a picture, type a title on top of it, and you're done. But that's not what a book cover really is. A book cover is a retail package. It's a package just like any other. Cereal, shampoo, auto parts, whatever you want to think about. It's the package that tells the world about your book. And people buy books in exactly the same way as they buy any other retail product. Something about the package grabs our attention. The largest text on the package tells us what's inside. It makes a promise. And then the details on the package convince us that we need to spend money on this product and not the product that may be right next to it on the shelf. So when buyers look at any package, they're asking one question: what's in it for me? Your book cover has to answer that single question in about 3 seconds. That's a pretty big job. So where do we begin? How should your book cover look? The answer is, it depends. What is your book about? Who is your audience? What exactly are you selling? The answers to these questions determine the look of your book cover. If you've written a novel, then you're selling entertainment, intrigue, romance, adventure. The title and the graphic have to pique the buyer's curiosity and hint at the story. The cover of a novel should not satisfy the buyer's curiosity or give away the story. We want the reader to imagine that this is a good book, and we want them to buy it. So there are a lot of different ways to do this, as you can see from these 3 bestsellers. Sometimes, as in the case of Stephen King, the author's name is the largest item on the cover. In Stephen King's case, that's entirely appropriate, because nobody cares about the title of his next book. They just care that it's finally available. In the middle example, we see the title first. the author's name and then the title first, and then a small iconic image that gives us a little hint about what the story may be about. I don't know, razor blades look pretty scary to me. And then sometimes we see the image and the title together, as in The Martian. And that tells us something about the story before we even have a chance to ask. So in fiction, you really need to get people interested, and then they will stop and read and learn more about the book before they decide to buy it. If you have written a nonfiction book, then we have the opposite challenge ahead of us. We need to tell the buyer as much as possible about the content so that we can move them toward that buying decision. On the left, Wheat Belly is a cookbook that asks us to give up bread and pasta, which is unthinkable to most people. So the cover, the publisher of this book, had to reassure buyers that this idea is not as crazy as it sounds. How did they do that? 30-minute recipes, 200 of them, pictures of food that look normal. That can put the buyer at ease and make them think to themselves, well, gee, that looks like good food. There's 200 recipes. I'm bound to like a few of them. Let me see if this is a good buy. In the middle cover, Laugh Out Loud Jokes for Kids, the design uses very funny fonts, right? So we know immediately that this is a joke book. But there's a method to the madness here. These fonts are also old-fashioned, so it sends a serious message to parents. This is a book that's safe for my kids to read. It's like the good old days. I don't have to worry if I buy this book that it's going to be filled with profanity or things I don't want my kids to see. This book is safe. In the Humans of New York cover, the cover reflects exactly what the book is. It's a book of photographs about people in New York. So we have no doubt about what we're buying when we see this cover. What if you are selling yourself? That happens in some cases if you're a speaker or a coach or a consultant of some sort. Some books sell two things, not only the author, but the topic. So the buyer is interested in not only the message, but who is delivering the message. And so that kind of cover would be designed in a different way. What if your book is a series? If you're planning a book series, all the titles should be written and all the covers should be planned before the first cover is designed so that you can establish a brand for your series of books. People have a lot of messages running by them all day, every day. If you establish that brand at the beginning, they're going to remember, oh yeah, I read the first one, or I read the second one, or the third one, and you will be recognized when it comes time to promote your next book. This title here, 10 Shoes Up, is a novel from Phoenix author Gary Stewart. And on the right are 4 concepts for his second book. The fonts are the same, the background is the same, and similar types of images. The colors change, but still it's clear that any one of these 4 concepts on the right belong with the first book. So that's what you always want to do if you've written a series. So once your manuscript is complete, you are no longer a writer. You're the owner of a publishing business. And once you know what you're selling and who you're selling it to, it's time to think like a publisher. When major publishers design a book cover, they don't care what the author likes. They only care what their buyers like. And publishers always begin the cover design process with research. And you can do the same. Now, how do we know what buyers like? It's easy. We can go to Amazon and look at the bestsellers and see what they're buying. So to get a sense of what your cover should look like, you can study the best-selling books in your genre and look at upcoming releases from major publishers and talk to the buyer at your local bookstore. And then you can share this information with your cover designer so the two of you can emulate the look and feel of these successful book covers. In this way, you can borrow some credibility for your title. If your book cover is designed to look like the bestsellers, then people will overlook the fact maybe that they haven't heard of you. If you go forward with a book cover that looks self-published, they may look at it and they may say to themselves, gee, I don't know, that one looks a little risky. I think I will pass. So it's very important to design your book in a way, in the same way as the bestsellers are designed in your genre. In these business books, the design is straightforward. Classic type fonts telegraph the message that the advice inside the book is reliable and trustworthy. And that, of course, is what business book buyers are looking for. In these three mystery suspense bestsellers, the colors are bold and the type is in your face. You can't ignore the titles of this book. You can almost feel your blood pressure rising just by looking at the covers. You know that these books contain adventure. So now look at these religious and spiritual books. They have an entirely different look and feel. The colors are soft, and we have light emanating from the background. And the look and feel of these covers is, well, religious and heavenly. So this is what people look for when they're shopping for a book on Amazon. So you have to make sure that your cover fits in with what buyers expect to see, because what you want to do is you want to put them at ease and allow them to choose your book without feeling they're taking an unnecessary risk. So do we have any questions before we move on to the next section?
We do. There's a question from George that should unknown authors put their name at the top of the page in large type as the well-known authors do?
I do not recommend that because if you're not a well-known author, then you're not the selling point yet. You can do that when you have a couple of books under your belt maybe, or when you've experienced some terrific sales and you're starting to become well-known. I would put the subject matter or the title or the subtitle as the most prominent element if it's your first book.
Okay. From a question from Susan, what about, are there the best colors for covers, or does that change by genre?
Well, it does change by genre, just like I showed on these slides here. That you see the religious books are very pale pastels or light emanating from the background, and the mysteries are entirely different. Bold, red, black, clouds, dark. And then the business books are primarily typographic. Because the business books are promoting information that's reliable. So yeah, these are good examples of how you might design a book differently for different genres.
Okay, for business books, do you suggest having a photograph or an illustration on the cover? Does it not of the author? I assume that's the question, but like they have the bull there. Would it be better to have a photo of a bull, or does the illustration suffice?
Oh, I don't think it matters whether it's an illustration or a photo, but as you can see here, business books tend to either be all type, like the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, or if they do have an image, it's usually a small iconic image like the pencil or the bull. The primary thing is the title and the information that the business book author is selling. That should take center stage.
Okay. Question from Laura. Are there copyright issues in imitating another author's bestseller cover? For example, one of your slides imitates the cover of Blink and others by the same author.
Well, you never want to copy anyone's design point by point. There's no problem in emulating a design by choosing, for example, the same sort of classic fonts, but you never want to copy exactly, because just people may notice that, and then you'll start to look like someone who maybe is not as honest as they would like. So I wouldn't copy exactly.
Okay. Question from Mary. How does cover design relate to interior design? Many authors are aware that the cover is important, but how important is that the cover design match up to the interior?
Well, the cover doesn't have to match the interior, but of course I'm of the school of thought that your interior should be just as professional as the cover. It should be designed by a designer and typeset properly. A lot of indie authors make the mistake of designing, hiring a designer to create a great cover, and then they lay out the book in Word themselves. And so what they're essentially doing is wrapping a good cover around a poorly created interior. And that's not going to do you any good because buyers know the difference, The interior of the book doesn't have to exactly match the cover, although when we do it, we try to pick up the same type fonts and the same look and feel. But the interior should be definitely compatible with the cover.
Okay. One from Richard. For online, should the title be very bold that can be read as a thumbnail?
Well, yeah, that's always a consideration when we design any cover. We want it to look good in actual size, and we want it to look good in thumbnail size. So when we design a cover, we always test that, and we ask the author to test it too. Reduce it on screen to 25 or 30% so you can tell if the title is visible online, because most books are sold online now, so that is the first thing that people see. So the title at least has to be visible. It's not necessary to make the subtitle readable because that appears in the text right beside the book, but you sure want to make sure that the title is visible.
Sure. Just as an aside there, it's also very important considering for a catalog, that if you have your book cover, it will be a thumbnail size in a catalog, so it should be readable and it should be able to stand out with good color. Sometimes a white cover like the one on the left is not as doesn't stand out as much in a catalog as the Michael Lewis one does because of the cover. But also, the type is all good on those.
That's right. That's right. And you should also think about what the cover design is going to look like in black and white. You might want to print it out on a black and white laser printer just to see how the color values translate to grayscale. You want to make sure that it looks good in if you ever should send out a fax or something with your cover image on it, you want to make sure it looks good in all the different ways that you'll be using it.
Great point. One final question here, that you said that you should be like all covers in your genre. Your cover should be the same as the other covers in your genre. Wouldn't it be better to be different to stand out from the others?
Well, if you look at if you were to go to Amazon and type in best-selling business books, for example, you'll find a lot of different concepts. So I would still suggest emulating one of those concepts and not really doing something that's really out there, because buyers need to feel safe. And until, when you're Stephen King, you can do anything. But until you get established, some of his covers I don't think they're actually very good, but he's Stephen King, so he can get away with it. I recommend not taking any unnecessary chances when you're first starting out. Especially with your first book, your goal is to become known and to start building a fan base. You don't want to do anything that might discourage someone from clicking on your book and learning more about it.
Okay. We're still getting a lot of questions popping up here, Michelle. Do you want to keep taking questions now?
Well, it depends. I guess so. We can move on to the next section and take more at the end. Okay.
Just I didn't know if you wanted to proceed or just handle these questions as they come in.
Well, why don't we continue, because maybe some of these questions will be answered as we go along.
Okay. John, Robert, Catherine, Susan, we'll get to your questions momentarily.
Okay. So next topic. Here we are. What makes a book cover work? It's not only about how it looks, it's about how it works. So once we have an idea of how the cover should look, we need to think about the cover text. And remember that buyers don't know a thing about your book yet. We have to tell them what the book is about. And they're asking some questions. They're asking themselves, is this book going to entertain me? Is it going to educate me? Is it going to help me to solve some problem I'm facing in my life? And if we can answer those questions successfully, then buyers will spend money with us. If we don't answer those questions successfully with the cover text, they're going to move on to the next book. We never want somebody to do that. So how do we tell them? How do we answer those questions? Primarily with the title. Your title should be short, and it should be straight to the point. And if you can, use short words and keep the title maybe 2, 3, 4 words at most, because that is what allows your designer to make a really in-your-face design like this one. And short titles have another benefit. They're easy for everyone to remember, and they're easy for you to say when you're speaking about your book. And you're going to be speaking about your book a lot, so you don't want to weigh yourself or anybody else down with a 10-word title. It creates a problem that doesn't need to be created. So in nonfiction, a compelling title isn't always enough to tell the story. Look at this book, The Daniel Plan. Well, the Daniel Plan doesn't really tell us much, although we can start to get an idea with the cross and the letter D, and we can start to see from the pastel type colors and the light colors that this is probably a spiritual book of some kind. But look at what they did. They packed their subtitle with all kinds of great keywords. And you want to do that too, so your book will pop up online even when people are not necessarily looking for a book. Maybe they're just not looking for information on Google. If you have good keywords in your title and subtitle, then your book will pop up. Now, the subtitle of this book, 40 Days to a Healthier Life, right? That's a pretty nice promise. Everybody wants to be healthier. But look at this, the 40 days, right? I'm sure they could have, that's a biblical reference. It's a common time period in many Bible stories. I'm sure they could have picked 25 days or 29 days or 35 days, but they didn't. They had a purpose, 40 days to a healthier life. And look at all the keywords. I don't know if you can see them up on top here. Faith, food, fitness, focus, friends. All of these are highly searched topics on the internet, so it's really no surprise that this book became a bestseller. So once you have your cover text down, now we have to think about how are we going to design it. Your cover should have a clear hierarchy so that the buyer gets the most important information first, and then the next important information, and then finally the least important information. You want to think about that because our eyes automatically go directly to the largest, brightest item that's in front of us. And as we started to talk about before, your author name really should be small unless you are already famous and people are looking for you as well as the information. Now, on this cover, this author is famous, and so his name is a little bit larger than it might otherwise be, and he included his picture, but still, with the hierarchy that you see here, there's no question what this book is about. And then this promise in the subtitle tells people what they're going to get if they buy this book, so that's something you always want to do. And after you think about the hierarchy, then you need to think about the mood of your cover. The cover design has to capture the mood of the text that's inside. So in the sample on the left, we know this is not going to be a happy story, don't we? The photo, the sepia tone photo, the little girl that's not smiling, the title of the book, Just One More Day, we know that this is not going to be a happy story. Now compare that to the book in the middle, Mistakes I Made at Work. We already know we're going to laugh at this book, right? Who hasn't scribbled and made mistakes and crossed out and whited out? Already we think this is going to be an interesting story to read. And on the right, the cover design tells us that this will be a sentimental story, possibly, and it says a memoir of friendship. But the photo on the cover telegraphs that message even before the buyer has a chance to think about it. And that's what a cover should always do. Now, we get a lot of questions about what kind of text should go on the cover. People will ask me all the time, should I put endorsements on the cover, or should I put the name of the person who wrote the foreword on the cover? And I answer it this way. The front cover is for the famous. If you have an endorsement from a celebrity whose name would be recognized by everyone in the country, then yeah, go ahead, put that on the front cover. If the endorsement is from someone who maybe is an expert in your field but not known to everyone in the country, then that might go on the back cover. And if you have endorsements from people who are not recognizable to anyone, then those should go inside on the first page of the book. On the front cover, it's important to avoid clutter. You don't want to give people too many messages. Less is more. You want to treat your front cover design like a billboard. We don't want to confuse buyers, because when buyers are confused, they don't stop to figure it out. They go on to the next book. So what kind of text should go on the back cover? If the front cover has done its job, it pulls the buyer around to the back cover text or the online text. The back cover is where you close the sale. The front cover gets people interested. The back cover sells them. So every word on your back cover counts. If it doesn't sell your book, leave it off. How many words should you put on the back cover? Once upon a time, publishers would put about 600 words on the back cover. Not anymore. Today, people want information and they want it fast. So now I recommend 300 words or so for the back cover. I also recommend putting a headline on your back cover. Don't make the reader or the prospective buyer wait for your most important message. Give it to them in a headline. And then if the headline grabs them, then they're likely to read more and get to that buying decision. You can put a summary of, if your book is nonfiction, you can put a summary of the book. You can put some bullet points maybe that tell them what's included in the book. And then I always recommend that you close with a call to action. Ask them to buy the book. Don't assume they're going to do it on their own. Tell them, you need this book. Don't wait a minute. Buy it today. You've always got to be marketing when you're selling a book. Another question I get all the time is, should I put my bio on the back cover? That depends. I would say if your bio establishes your authority to write the book, then yes, of course, put it on the back cover. If you're a doctor and you wrote a medical book, then that's a selling point. People want to know that you're qualified to give the advice you're giving. Otherwise, I would put your bio inside the book. People ask me, should I put my photo on the back cover? Again, if you are well known, if people would recognize your face from TV, then sure, go ahead and put your photo on the back cover. Otherwise, don't waste the space. Use every square inch of the back cover to sell your book. So what else happens on the cover? The spine, right? Don't overlook the spine. The spine of your book has one purpose, and that is to be seen from a distance. So the spine type and images, if any, have to catch the eye. On the spine, you want to use as few words as possible and make them as large as possible. Now, sometimes it's not easy to design the spine if it's only 1/4 of an inch wide, but you do what you can with what you've got. On the spine, I would emphasize the most important words and make them a larger size. And use brighter colors for those important words. Maybe a different font, or all of the above. Sometimes you can wrap the front cover image around to the spine to create a little bit of visual interest. Whatever you do, please don't use vertical type on the spine. It's the mark of a self-published book, and you'd never want to telegraph that. So basically, as you can see, there's a lot to think about in a cover design. It's not just picking a picture and putting a title on it. Your cover is the focus of your marketing effort. Every tweet you send out, every blog post, every press release is going to bring people right to your cover, and you have one chance to capture their attention and make them buy. And so fortunately, this is what book covers are trained to do, and that's what we will cover in the next section. Do you have any more questions?
We do. Go back to something that were before. Here's from Robert. Classic books had no colored pictures on a cover. Should a book emulate a classic book style, or should it be made in a newer style?
Well, it depends. I would have to know more about the book, your book, to answer that question. Sometimes classic can be interpreted as old-fashioned. That may or may not be appropriate for what you're trying to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Here, one from John. For a book that is sold as a Kindle or other ebook, doesn't most of the interior design, I'm not sure what the question is, doesn't most of the interior design Can your design actually be included in an ebook submission?
Not so much. Ebooks, with ebooks, we sacrifice beauty for functionality. The text has to be able to reflow to fit on a device as small as a phone, an iPhone screen, or as large as an iPad, or even as large as a display on a computer monitor. So the things we would ordinarily focus on for interior design sort of go away with an ebook interior. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't pay attention to how that final ebook is going to look. A lot of work is required to make sure that the pictures stay in place and that within the limits of what the technology allows, we want to make sure we craft the book so that it takes advantage of the things we are able to take advantage of, even while we're sacrificing some of the beauty that would ordinarily occur in print for the functionality.
Okay. Well, here's one from Mary. Endorsements on a back cover. I've heard 17 to 25 words is a good range. Is that correct?
Well, I don't know if the number of words is as important as the amount of space that the endorsements take up. I mean, you could have one long endorsement or 3 very short ones, depending on who wrote them for you. But you want to make sure that you focus mostly on a synopsis of the book in your sales pitch, because, as I said in the beginning, people are asking, what's in it for me? And sometimes your endorsements can answer that question, but more often it's the text that you come up with that answers the question.
Okay. From Richard, for a non-famous author where the bio is inside the book, would you recommend a photo?
Oh, yeah, sure. That's a good place to put a photo. When I talked about the photo before, I was just thinking you don't want to waste space on the back cover. You want to use the back cover for words more so than your photo, unless you're famous.
Okay. Can you easily get back to the Daniel plan?
Sure.
Question came up about that.
Okay.
That there doesn't appear to be good contrast with the white on the blue background. Is it okay to have black type there to improve the contrast?
Oh, yeah, sure. This is a screen grab from Amazon, so I wouldn't judge the contrast by this especially. It may look better in person.
Okay.
Yeah.
But just in general, it's good to have good contrast. Right?
Well, yeah, true. But see, in this case, it's a spiritual book, so they're looking for that soft look. So maybe in this case, if you made that bottom section black, that would kind of create a disconnect.
Not black. I was thinking black on blue, black type on blue. But
yeah. Well, that's the kind of thing you experiment with when you're working on cover design concepts. You might ask your designer, "Can I see that in a different color?" And then you both can judge whether or not that's a good idea.
Okay. There's one from James. On the rear cover for fiction, should you tell about the story or about the author?
Oh, a little bit about the story, but you always want to leave the buyer hanging. You don't want to give away the ending. You just want them to say to themselves, "Gee, that sounds good." It sounds. You might ask some questions on the back cover, like, "What is George going to do in this situation?" Or just make it compelling.
Okay. From Meredith, I have some wonderful endorsements that I was planning to put on the back cover, but they are long. They really have to be in the book somehow. Is the front of the book the right place?
Well, maybe you can pick the best of those endorsements and put 1 or 2 on the back cover and then put the rest inside the book. That's great. Congratulations that you've got great endorsements.
Oh, okay. Great question from Mary. Hi, Mary. Do you have any tips for a designer who is dealing with, this is great, you'll love this one. Do you have any tips for a designer who's dealing with a client who thinks their taste trumps all?
Yeah, well, that's not as uncommon as you might think.
Yeah, that's why I kind of giggled at that one.
Yeah, I think every designer kind of battles that to some degree. You try to, you try to accomplish two goals when you have a cover design project in front of you. You try to provide good design, and you try to make your client happy. And, you know, some people like to grab the reins, and that's what makes them happy. You do the best you can.
Okay, I guess it becomes a quandary of you if what the client wants is not necessarily a good cover. I guess you can only push so far, and then because the
Yeah.
client's paying the bill.
Well, yeah. I mean, I always push back and I always explain, but you don't want to get into a battle where it's just, you know, I think my taste is better than your taste.
Oh, yeah.
When I push back, I try to give good, solid reasons, marketing reasons why what they're asking for may not be in their best interest. But ultimately, every business has to please their clients. It's just the way it is.
Yeah. What's the best page count for a good size spine width?
Oh, well, let's see. The spine width of cream paper is 0.0025. So let's say if you have a 200-page book, that's going to, let's see, that'll give you a spine width of 1/2 inch, which is good. You can do something with 1/2 inch.
Okay.
Yeah.
Will you be talking about children's books later on, or if not, do you have any tips that you can talk about now?
Well, I wasn't planning to talk about children's books, but I'll be happy to answer your questions offline if you want.
Okay. Your email will be coming up at the end, right?
Yes. Yes.
How do you feel about using QR codes on the rear cover?
Well, that's a good question, and it depends. If your QR code is going to bring the buyer to a book, to a website where you're selling your book, then bookstores are going to hate that. You know, and anyone who's retailing your book is going to hate that. But if the QR code just brings the buyer to more information about you or your title, then that's a perfectly fine thing to do.
Would you please just explain what a QR code is for everybody?
Okay, a QR code is those funny little square patterns that you see on ads and sometimes book covers. Basically, it's something that you can scan with your phone, and it takes the user right to your website. So it's kind of a cool thing to have. But like I said, if you want a bookstore to carry your book, they're not going to be interested if you've made it easy for someone to buy elsewhere.
This website I found, I think it's called QRstuff.com. You can get QR codes that you can put on T-shirts or ball caps or pens or business cards or whatever. So I haven't checked that site recently, but it used to be it's a free site that you can get a QR code for whatever purpose.
Oh yeah, you can get free QR codes anywhere that don't go buying them.
Yeah, that QRstuff.com is one good site I found. One last question here. What about cover designs for books destined for countries outside the U.S.? Do all these tips apply there too?
Well, I suppose every region has its own preferences in that regard. Usually, if you're selling your rights to a foreign country, the foreign publisher would redesign the book.
Okay, we're all set. Just to take it away again, Michelle.
Oh, okay. So let's go back here. Okay, so the next section, what we're going to do is look at some do-it-yourself covers and compare them to professional covers, just so that you can see the difference. And it's surprising sometimes that authors who design their own covers just tend to look at their own cover. They don't look at what the professional counterpart might be. So I'm hoping this will just throw some light on that subject. In these two examples here, we talked a little bit about the emotion and the mood of a cover. And in the next four slides, I'm going to contrast the difference between a do-it-yourself cover and a designed cover. So before your book cover is designed, what you can do is type your title into Amazon. And this will give you a preview of the kind of books that Amazon is going to display when people search for your book. So you can see on the left here, the do-it-yourself cover really has no emotion at all. The title is pretty good, Where is Baby? That sounds like an interesting book, but the colors are drab and the baby isn't smiling and the photo is really very poor. So it just doesn't appeal to me or I think anybody else. But when I type the title, Where is Baby, into Amazon, look at what came up. The professional cover on the right is delightful, right? It's got a great title, Where is Baby's Yummy Tummy? The professional illustration, lots of color, a childlike font. All of the elements work together to make us want to buy, I think, this book instead of the one that's on the left. Now, here's a self-published book that fails in the typography department. The do-it-yourself cover on the left, the title is way too long. The font is difficult to read. There's entirely too much going on in the background. There's, I don't know, 4 or 5 or 6 different scenes, as well as the 2 characters in the bottom. So on the right is another vampire book. The colors are similar. The self-published author got that right, the black and the red. But the title on the right pops so much more, and those diagonal slashes tell us immediately that this book is a collection of violent short stories. So I think you can see how much more effective the professionally designed cover is. Now in this example, we get back to mood again. The do-it-yourself cover on the left doesn't express the correct mood of the story. The description on Amazon describes Lucy's Christmas Miracle as a heartwarming story about the rescue of a toddler. Well, that doesn't look too heartwarming to me. When I typed that title into Amazon, the book on the right popped up. See here, you can see the color and the fonts and the greeting card imagery. All of those elements work together to tell us, without us having to ask, that this book is filled with heartwarming stories. Now here's an example of another issue that is common. The cover on the left, and that's hierarchy, but the cover on the left was actually designed by a graphic designer, but not someone who was experienced with cover design. So as you can see, it doesn't really have any hierarchy. The title doesn't pop. The torn paper border doesn't really serve any purpose. It just hems in the image. And that gigantic oversized gold key down here is really a distraction. It draws the eye away from the title. So in the redesign on the right, the border is gone. The title really pops. It's composed of 3 colors and 3 type sizes if you look close. And we replaced the huge key with a more subtle graphic. And then after we found that graphic, we decided that didn't go with the colors that were in the dog's tie. And so we changed the colors in the tie to make it match and give the cover a more unified look. And I think it's a more effective cover. So that's the end of the cover analysis section, and I will move on to working with a designer unless there are more questions.
Question from Mary. Thank you very much for this information. I appreciate it. If you have not done this yet, will you please describe the steps involved in working with a book cover and interior designer? Self-published authors do a lot of waiting, editing, book registration, printing, timetables. What is the average and reasonable length of time to plan when working with a book designer?
Well, that's a great question, Mary. It depends on the number of services that you're ordering. If your manuscript is already edited, then of course the design process can usually be completed, I would say, in counting rounds of revisions and so forth, usually 8 to 10 weeks. It would be a good time period. If you finish sooner, then great. Everybody can celebrate and relax a little bit. But that's better than bringing it right down to the wire and having an event scheduled and you're still working on initial cover concepts. So I guess I would say 8 to 10 weeks, but the most important thing is don't schedule any events until you're pretty far along into the process, because that just makes everybody stressed out and crazy.
Could you describe the steps involved with working with a book cover and interior designer?
Sure, I was going to do that next.
Oh, okay.
Basically,
We can wait.
basically, yeah, okay. Why don't anybody else?
Nope. Take it
Okay,
away. It's all yours.
okay. So now that you know all of that, now you've got to decide which designer to work with, right? And there are thousands of choices online, all kinds of websites. There's Fiverr and 99 Designs and all kinds of other offerings from designers. So how do you choose? How do you find the right designer for your book? My advice is always to work with a book cover design specialist, as I said, because creating a book cover takes a lot of practice. It's a specialized skill within the general field of graphic design. Sometimes general graphic designers who are very talented and able to create beautiful brochures or newspaper ads and so forth just can't capture the unique look and feel that a book cover has to have. Next, I would suggest that you review the designer's portfolio. I mean, it's wonderful now that we can put our portfolios online. I've been in this business long enough to remember when we used to walk around with gigantic leather cases and have to show people our designs, spreading them out on a table. But fortunately, that's not necessary anymore. So, but if you review the designer's portfolio, I suggest that you don't look at the portfolio in isolation, but open up 2 windows on your browser and compare the designer's portfolio to the best-selling books on Amazon to make sure that you're working with a designer who can create covers on that level. Because if you just look at the covers of a designer in isolation, they may look just fine, but they may not be up to the level that you really need. And finally, I always recommend that you talk to the designer and get to know the human being behind the website and make sure that the chemistry between you is right. You want to find somebody that is interested in your book, someone who explains what they do, someone who gets back to you. If you leave a message, you want to think about how long did it take me to get a reply to that message. If you sent an email and you asked for a quote, how soon did you get a reply? That could be an indication of the kind of service that you're going to get from that designer or that design firm. So once you've narrowed it down to maybe a few designers, the next question to ask is, what am I going to get? Designers are independent business owners. We all work in different ways. So the most important thing is to clarify your expectations up front. Talk to the designer. Ask them about their process. Ask them about their rates and their turnaround times. Don't be shy about that. You're entitled to the information, and it's much better to get the information up front than to make assumptions and find out that your assumptions were wrong. If you have a firm deadline, please tell your designer in the very first conversation, because we want to meet your needs. You know, it doesn't help to tell the designer in the middle of the project, oh, by the way, I need everything done in a week, because then there's not much we can do about that. So, you know, clarify your expectations up front. Another thing you might want to talk to your designer about is the difference between concepts and variations. Well, what am I talking about? A concept is a distinctly different design approach that will give you a choice of directions to follow in your cover design. These 3 examples are 3 different concepts that we did for the book Mentorship. Now, usually multiple concepts are presented, and then one concept is chosen for further refinement. Now, those refinements are called variations. So here are the variations we did for this book cover. A variation is just a small change in the design to see what it looks like, in this case, with different colors. Concepts, of course, take more time to develop than variations. So we've seen some designers in the marketplace call these 3 variations concepts. So you want to make sure if you're working with if you're thinking a designer is offering an appealing low price, make sure they know that you know what you're going to get. Are you going to get concepts, or are you going to get variations? Very important difference to clarify before the work begins. The most important thing when you're working with a designer is make sure there are no surprises. Ask your designer how many revisions are included in the quote, and I always say watch out for the words unlimited revisions or reasonable revisions. there's no such thing as unlimited revisions, right? Nobody works for an unlimited amount of time for a flat fee. When someone says unlimited revisions, what they really mean is that at some point in the process, they're going to quit. You don't know when that is, but they do. So there's no such thing as unlimited revisions. Reasonable revisions are also open to misinterpretation. What's reasonable? Maybe the designer thinks 3 rounds are reasonable, and maybe you think you'd rather see 8 or 10 or 12 rounds of revisions. Again, that's something that you shouldn't assume, you should ask about, so that both you and the designer can be clear about your expectations and what's going to happen up front. And that, more than anything else, is what makes a very pleasant cover design collaboration experience. Nobody wants to fight. So ask all the questions you want. If you're talking to somebody who gets impatient with your questions, well, then you know you've got the wrong designer. You need to move on to somebody else. So that's the end of my prepared material. I hope you found at least a few helpful points to take away from this, and I'll be happy to take more of your questions.
Great information, Michelle. Thank you very much. We do have a few more questions.
Sure.
How much should we prepare to spend for a good cover design?
Well, what that boils down to is how much work do you want the designer to do, right? Time is money. So the way we approach that subject is we offer 4 different levels of cover design. We let people who need to save money save some money if they want to choose the images for their cover. If they want to spend the time to research and choose images, they can save some money. And if they want us to do it and they want us to do some market research before we begin, then of course the levels go up. And you can find all that information on my website.
Okay. From Judith, can you please show the variations slide again and explain just a bit more?
Sure.
Thanks. Good presentation.
Sure. Okay. So these 3 covers here for mentorship were the original 3 concepts, right? Each one's very different. One of them contained, the one in the middle contained a detailed graphic. The ones on either side had the same sort of arrow graphic, but done in a different way, just to sort of hint about the process of mentoring. And so we spent the time to think about that. Sometimes people think that designs spring out of our heads without any time or consideration, but that's not true. We spent a lot of time thinking about the different typefaces to use and how they might be arranged and what colors and who the audience is and what they might expect to see in a book. And so here's the variations. The author chose the middle concept, and then we did these variations. We weren't sure what background color to use, so we just experimented with some different versions. And she ultimately went with the middle version, the yellow. But it's helpful to see those variations, and sometimes even designers get surprised at the difference that a change in color can make. So that's where the collaboration comes in. You should never be shy about collaborating with your designer. And again, if you have a designer that gets cranky about that, well, they just don't have enough experience to realize that they might be pleasantly surprised by something you suggest.
Okay. Here's a question from Swaya that can you show more of your work? I guess they can see that on your website, right?
Oh yeah, I have about 60 or 70 book covers up on our website, and you can see them there.
Sure. Laura says, terrific, thanks so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Jacqueline asks, will you be sending us a copy of the slides?
Yes, I will. I've got, I'm going to send a free PDF copy of this presentation and my remarks to anyone who sends me an email, md@1106design.com. And I hope you will visit my website and download my free book, Publish Like the Pros, A Brief Guide to Quality Self-Publishing. Again, you'll find that sign-up form at 1106design.com. And I thank you very much for your time today. It's been wonderful.
Great, Michelle. Thank you very much. And a lot of comments coming in. Great presentation. Thank you. So I appreciate that.
Well, thank you very much, everybody.
Good night, and thank you all for joining us. I'll get the link